Nobody expected what happened next, because what looked like another familiar royal headline quickly turned into a chain of questions that refused to disappear, and the deeper people looked, the more unusual the picture became. Public attention was originally focused on the well-known disagreements that had dominated headlines for years, yet behind those stories another narrative was quietly taking shape, one that centered not on dramatic interviews or media appearances but on a series of decisions that, when viewed together, appeared difficult to ignore. Each event seemed ordinary when considered on its own, but placed side by side they painted a picture that invited closer examination. Those who had spent years following every development noticed the same pattern emerging again and again, while others only began asking questions much later when certain details refused to fit comfortably alongside the public narrative. Long before these events attracted widespread attention, investigators had earned reputations for carefully examining official records, speaking with numerous sources and comparing public statements with documented facts rather than relying on speculation or anonymous gossip. Their work had often unsettled powerful figures, not because of dramatic accusations, but because their conclusions rested upon evidence collected over long periods of time. Throughout previous investigations, the same approach had produced uncomfortable outcomes for influential individuals who possessed considerable legal resources and public support, yet attempting to dismiss the findings often drew even greater attention to them. That reputation alone meant many observers paid close attention when fresh questions began to surface surrounding decisions made over recent years. Instead of focusing solely on interviews, television appearances, or newspaper headlines, attention gradually shifted towards details that had received comparatively little discussion. Certain family milestones, carefully managed announcements, and symbolic choices attracted increasing scrutiny, not because they were controversial in isolation, but because they appeared to follow a consistent pattern once arranged in chronological order. It became less about isolated incidents and more about whether those incidents collectively revealed something that had remained hidden in plain sight. The timing of key moments also attracted considerable interest. Decisions made during periods of heightened public attention seemed designed to achieve maximum visibility, while quieter moments often passed without explanation despite raising equally important questions. This contrast encouraged many people to revisit earlier events with fresh eyes, comparing official statements with subsequent developments and asking whether everything had unfolded exactly as originally presented. Even those who had previously accepted the public narrative without hesitation began noticing small inconsistencies that seemed increasingly difficult to overlook. As more information entered the public domain, discussions expanded beyond newspapers and television into countless online conversations where viewers compared timelines, public records, and official comments. Some believed the differences were insignificant, while others argued it pointed towards something much larger. Regardless of opinion, interest continued growing because every new detail encouraged people to reconsider what they thought they already understood. Rather than producing clear answers, each revelation seemed to create another question, extending the conversation instead of bringing it to a close. If you found this story interesting so far, take a moment to subscribe because there is much more still to uncover, and the next part becomes even more revealing as the focus moved beyond familiar headlines towards a sequence of events that many people overlooked entirely. What made the situation especially compelling was not one dramatic accusation, but the steady accumulation of facts, dates, and decisions which, viewed together, suggested remarkable consistency. Observers began examining why certain announcements occurred when they did, why particular symbols carried such significance, and why responses to growing public curiosity often remained surprisingly limited. In many cases, silence proved almost as noteworthy as the original events themselves, encouraging even more discussion among those attempting to understand the wider picture. The longer the timeline became, the harder it was to dismiss everything as coincidence because similar themes appeared repeatedly across several years, linking separate moments into one continuous story that continued attracting attention far beyond the usual cycle of royal news. As the timeline continued to unfold, attention gradually shifted towards a series of personal decisions that many people had barely noticed at the time, yet together they raised questions that refused to disappear. One particular decision stood out more than any other, not because it broke any rules, but because of the symbolism attached to it. Within royal circles, names often carry history, emotion, and tradition, making every choice significant beyond its surface meaning. While supporters viewed it as a heartfelt tribute, others believed it created an uncomfortable contradiction when placed alongside previous public statements about distancing themselves from royal life. That disagreement alone kept the conversation alive, but it was only the beginning. Soon afterwards, other milestones began attracting similar scrutiny, including carefully timed appearances, family events, and public announcements that seemed to arrive precisely when global attention was at its highest. Critics argue that these moments strengthened an ongoing public connection with the monarchy, while supporters insisted they reflected nothing more than ordinary family decisions. Regardless of which view people accepted, the sequence itself remained impossible to ignore. Every development appeared to build upon the last, creating a pattern that many observers felt deserved close examination. What made the situation even more intriguing was a noticeable lack of direct responses whenever fresh questions emerged. Rather than engaging with every claim, official statement became increasingly limited, allowing speculation to fill the silence. For many people, that silence became almost as significant as the original events because unanswered questions naturally encouraged further debate. As weeks turned into months, discussion spread far beyond newspaper headlines, with countless viewers comparing public timelines, official records, and previous interviews in an effort to understand how each piece fitted into the wider story. Some concluded there was nothing unusual at all, while others believed the repeated contradictions suggested a far more complicated reality than anyone had first imagined. By this stage, the conversation had moved well beyond personalities and focused instead on consistency, credibility, and whether every public decision genuinely reflected the message being presented. That growing curiosity ensured the story remained firmly in the spotlight, with every new development encouraging people to revisit early events from an entirely different perspective. And by the time the next chapter unfolded, it was clear that the biggest questions were still waiting to be answered. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this breakdown and don't want to miss what comes next, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part reveals why these seemingly separate events became impossible for many observers to dismiss as mere coincidence.